Carl, thank you so much for joining me. I'm with Carl John Calleman, and he's a toxicologist as well as an author and speaker on the millenarian New Age interpretation of the Mayan calendar, known as Mayanism. And I came across your book, The Quantum Science of Psychedelics, while I was traveling in Egypt. Out of all of the books in the shop, there was everything from Egyptian magic and um, different ancient teachings. The quantum science of psychedelics stuck out to me. Yeah, so thanks so much for uh, for carving some time out, Carl.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan, for
Uh,
inviting me to chat about this. I think many times that particular book, The Quantum Science of Psychedelics, has not been given enough of attention, and I'm happy to have a chance to chat with you about it. Um, it basically it looks upon the psychedelic experience in the context of the evolving human consciousness. And the way I look upon it, the best source we have if we want to get a handle on how human consciousness has evolved over the millennia, or even going back to the very birth of the universe. I think the source we have to consult is the ancient Mayan calendar system, and that's what I've devoted most of my life to exploring. Um, and It's a calendar system that is, in significant ways, different from other calendar systems. And I think that was a point that was missed by a lot of people when there was a lot of interest in the Mayan calendar prior to the year 2012. Um, People sort of failed to see that here we have a calendar system that is based on entirely different principles compared to our own. And what I mean by that is that our own calendar, and that goes pretty much for the rest of the world. If it's the Gregorian calendar, the Muslim calendar, the Jewish calendar, or anything like that, is basically based on the physical bodies, the celestial bodies moving in our solar system. And so we have months, presumably based on the revolution of the moon around the Earth, and we have years based on the revolution of the Earth around the sun. But this is really a materialist way of looking at reality. When it is assuming that what happens on the level of consciousness of people goes back to these kind of material changes that we see them reflected in most of the calendars. The Mayan calendar is not based on astronomy. And for that reason, it holds the potential of explaining uh, um, uh, evolution from a quantum perspective, the evolution of consciousness, and based on the assumption that consciousness is something fundamentally uh, 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 fundamental to our existence. It's not something that can be explained by anything else, by material factors of any nature. It is fundamental, and that's also what some of the pioneers of quantum theory would say exactly the same thing. And so this is the starting point. This is to understand that the Mayan calendar system is unique in the sense that it's not based on the physical movement of bodies or of the material reality. It is something that goes back to the very source of reality.
yeah, I love that perspective, and I love how you described it in different waves. I was hoping maybe you might be able to just briefly talk about the waves that consciousness evolved through as part of your what you put in the book here, and maybe how that related to the pyramids. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything around that you could share about that.
Yeah. Uh, just a second. Yes. So the Mayan calendar system in its entirety is a system of different waves that are connected. And you can't explain the entire evolution of the universe just by looking at one particular wave or one particular cycle that are creating our evolution. And starting with the first one that begins with the Big Bang about 16 billion years ago. And then it sort of, there's a sequence of waves with higher frequencies that are activated sequentially following that. So then there is another wave that was activated 800 million years ago that started to develop all the animals on our planet. And then there's a third wave that started to evolve the primates, which we are part of ourselves. And then the fourth wave is the last of the biologically evolutionary waves, which is evolving the human beings from the first very small-brained species coming out in Africa 2 million years ago up to the present Homo sapiens. And then from that on, this particular biological species, our own species, our mind is evolved through a sequence of higher waves with even higher frequencies, starting with the fifth wave that brings symbolic and artistic expression into the human capabilities. And the sixth wave, when all the civilizations arose, which is about 5,000 years ago. And then the seventh wave, which is 1755, which was the Industrial Revolution, and the eighth wave, which was the started in 1999, close to our own time, which is the digital revolution. And then the ninth wave, which is really what caps it all off and is still sort of waiting to be expressed. It was activated in 20. The people who were born into that state of consciousness, they're still waiting to come of age. We still don't sort of very strongly see that, even though there is a lot of, what should I say, undercurrents of people that are looking for more conscious ways of looking and of living and connecting to the earth and the universe in more constructive ways than currently. But that's the ninth wave, I would say, hasn't quite been activated. It's been activated, but it still hasn't been manifested very strongly because of the fact that few of us have still been born into that wave. So this scheme, you might say, is really then the basis for the most significant Mayan pyramids. Because if you go to the area in southern Mexico and Guatemala where they built their temple sites, you would find that in the major temple sites there would be a central plaza where there was a significant chief pyramid built in 9 levels. And you have it in Palenque, the Temple of the Inscriptions. You have it in Chichen Itza, the most visited of all the Mayan sites, in the Temple of El Castillo. And you have it in Tikal, in the Temple of the Great Jaguar. And so the pyramids are really sort of calendars cut in stone. and much is missed by interpretations that, regular scientists or astronomers are making by implying that this was just simple astronomical devices. The reality is that these are quantum structures, or structures that are quantized and sort of symbolize the whole evolution of the universe. And you might say that when shaman kings in the earlier times would climb these pyramids, it sort of enacted the evolution of the universe. And that's their main message. And there's a lot to learn in details from how the pyramids were created. If you go there, if you walk there, you will find that the number of stairs on the staircases and so forth really reflects calendrical cycles. So sort of doing ceremonies and these kind of sites and as part of this calendrical structure is then inserting your consciousness into this whole evolutionary process of consciousness that these pyramids reflect.
Thank you so much for tying that up into a nice well, I mean, there's so many things to explore with that. You mentioned before, you mentioned before that there's these different waves, and you said that in the ninth wave where it's been activated, but it hasn't been fully evolved, or it hasn't been really put out there in manifested, you said, in 3D reality. Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on what that looks like on when the ninth wave is fully manifested in 3D reality. Knowing that the eighth wave is the digital age, where interconnectivity and greater technology for people to connect. What do you perceive as the ninth wave? Does it have anything to do? Yeah, I'll leave it as that.
Yeah, okay. Well, the way I look upon it is that it is something that fosters and favors unity consciousness in human beings. In other words, the other waves, and I'm talking now about the higher waves, the ones that have served to develop the human mind, the ones from about 100,000 years ago until the present time. They have mostly filters. There are filters on the human perception of reality. And for instance, the sixth wave that started 5,000 years ago and gave rise to the civilizations, that wave carried a state of consciousness that was very much dualist, so to speak. The minds of people were dominated by what you could call a yin-yang polarity. Or to put it in a little bit other terms, it would make the left brain half of the people light and driving everything, whereas the right brain half would be darkened and suppressed. And what these states of consciousness meant, they had their purpose, of course. They did develop civilizations and technologies and so forth. But on the other hand, in terms of the human relations, it meant that people would project dark filter onto not only themselves, but also onto the others. And the result has been that even if civilizations in the past 5,000 years have made remarkable strides of evolution, the result has been a lot of warfare and conflicts and hierarchical structures and dominance of certain groups of people over all the rest. And that's because people have, whether they've been the dominating or the dominated, they have all carried that kind of that state of consciousness of duality, that state of consciousness that has a filter to the direct connection to the higher source. And the ninth wave does not have any of these filter that would sort of lead us to project some kind of hierarchical structure or so forth. So in principle, the ninth wave, or the unity state of consciousness that it carries, means the potential of looking at, of people starting to look upon themselves as being one, not just as some kind of a good mantra that people are already saying, but in a real sense, so to speak. And that is that is really the hope of humanity as I see it. You may even talk about it as some kind of a second coming. I'm using a term from the Christian terminology, and I don't quite, believe in that version of it, as if some individual would come and fix everything to it, for us, so to speak. No, it has to be people themselves, even if there are people that are sort of ahead of the crowd, and maybe some individual that is ahead of the crowd. This would only be a second coming, is only meaningful if it would be a real immutable shift in consciousness on a large scale of humanity. So with that, the unity consciousness in principle is not just of taking away the power of the dominance of some people over others, but it also takes away the dominance of human beings over nature, which is really a mental structure that has it's been mostly in the seventh wave. It's been evident, and it's that it by itself is really what has become the cause of the many very obvious environmental problems, and the heat problems, and climate change problems that we are facing at the current time. But and of course, we still need to deal with all these effects of our previous immaturity, you might say. But if there is an immutable shift to this ninth state of consciousness, then the world will not turn back, so to speak. There will be a chance of moving forward.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so much there, so much wisdom there. And you said before that the pyramids, or Ichitan, and the pyramids, they have these different levels on them. I'm actually looking at one of your diagram in your book at the moment. Um, so yeah, I wonder, the name of the book is Quantum Science of Psychedelics. I wonder how, I know when I was in the Giza Plateau, you see blue lotuses all over the walls there. I'm wondering, yeah, how these ancient civilizations created these structures with meaning, calendar meaning, from seemingly prior to the eighth or ninth stage. And yeah, does that change how we think about time? Yeah, what is your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think our our experience of time is profoundly conditioned by the state of consciousness that we're in. And my view is, for instance, that the people that lived before the civilizations, the the people that created cave paintings and so forth in the fifth wave, they really were not dominated by a strict timeline in the same way as the people that came after. But when people, when the sixth wave was downloaded or activated and people started to download it, then a new time perception of time emerged, and one that was, in a sense, more limited. It was more constrained, and that's the reason that people started to use calendars in order in order to follow time, so to speak. People became aware that there was major changes going on a cosmic level, and then they started to use calendars in order to capture the essence of these changes as a tool to understand more why we're here and what where it's meant to go, really. And if you go to the Giza Plateau that you mentioned, that's really a monument created very early in the sixth wave, and you can see that in certain ways it's built as a in the way I look upon it anyway, it's built to honor the fact that now a new civilization had emerged on our planet based on this new structured mind that this part, the sixth wave activated in 5,000 years ago, that this wave was carrying. Well, I'm not sure if that was exactly what you were getting at, or but maybe you can tell me. It's at least it's something
Yes. Yeah.
that I wanted to add.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So you're saying that the pyramids were are a monument of the sixth wave, which is all about time
Yeah,
and more linear progression. Whereas in the fifth wave, people didn't really have that much conscious capacity around, or they didn't. It was at their level, or I don't know how you would phrase it, of thinking in timelines like that in a linear way. Um, Yeah, I'm curious for the ninth
yeah.
wave. You saying that we're going back towards the a right brain away from the left brain, or it's an inclusion of both? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that? And then how do psychedelics fit into all of this?
Yeah. So the reason I think psychedelics is playing a part in the transformational consciousness on not just of individuals. I mean, most individuals that take psychedelics, they think this is just their own personal individual action and for their own benefit or interest in one way or another. But the way I look upon it, the current sort of expansion of psychedelics and the use of psychedelics is really part of this cosmic plan. It's really something that expresses the waves, and it prepares the ground, you might say, for this ninth wave state of consciousness, of unity consciousness. And it does so by sort of disengaging that whole mindset that was downloaded 5,000 years ago. The mindset not only of the structure, but it was also but also of social dominance and hierarchies of a political, military, and religious nature. And so if that is really the ultimately it is that will be the task of the ninth wave to bring that kind of unity consciousness about. But what psychedelics do is that it disengages this structure, this geometry of the mind that has upheld the hierarchies. And so, in that sense, it does hold the potential and is part of these processes preparing for unity consciousness. And of course, it is also a possibility for people to at least temporarily experience this kind of a unity state of consciousness. It's, most people that have
Hmm.
uh, worked with the psychedelics, they have experienced that it sort of breaks down boundaries of the mind. It breaks down the ego temporarily, at least. You get a taste of what an egoless experience of life might be like. And so, in this sense, I think it's part of it's part of the much larger cosmic scale evolution that the universe is meant to bring.
Yeah, yeah, that's very well articulated. And yeah, so going back to the ancient Egyptians, we see these blue lotus on the walls there. I'm just wondering what your relationship with the blue lotus and the pyramids might be, if any.
Okay. Well, I'm not particularly familiar with that. I do think, how did, my if I'm coming from the basic knowledge of the Mayan calendar system, and they did describe the Maya, especially in Palenque at the Temple of Inscriptions there. They did describe what happened when the sixth wave was activated 5,100 years ago. And they said that there was some kind of an eight partitioning being, which is then really a geometry of, like a eight partition star, you might say, that became visible from the source of the cosmos, from the heart of the tree of life, as they said. And so, and we can figure out then that if that became available at the cosmic source, it would also mean that human beings could start to download this particular structure, and as a result, they built for the first time, really, they started to build pyramids and cities that were based on straight lines, and also this kind of eight partitioned structure, like the Giza pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is eight-sided, which is exactly what you would predict from the Mayan explanation of the rise of civilization at that time. But then back to the lotus, important in Egyptian symbology, is really eight partitioned. It's like eight petals, and it comes back in the traditions in India. The the Sri yantras have these kind of eight petals, and so the reason I think the especially the lotus flower has become such an important part of symbology is exactly that that is at least many of them are eight partitioned, or eight petaled is the way I like to say. Now, it may be maybe you if you know that these blue lotuses have some kind of a mind-altering effects or something, you would have to let me know, because I'm not familiar with that particular topic.
Yeah, I drank a bit of it. It wasn't like it was like a light. a light, very, very light, like a microdose from psilocybin, very, very small,
Yeah.
no real visuals or anything, and just a relaxed state. So I was just, yeah, seeing
Hmm.
them all over on the in the pathways in the pyramids. I'm like, okay, there must be something to it, but it wasn't. I mean, they must be having it in really large doses to have some more downloads. But that brings me to
Hmm.
another concept or another substance in your book. You mentioned a little bit about dimethyltryptamine, so DMT. I wonder if you could just
Hmm.
speak briefly about that and um, how that relates to our conversation.
Yeah. Well, dimethyltryptamine is an endogenous substance, and it has at higher doses. It does have clear psychedelic effects, and you might say it is the sort of the simplest of the family of psychedelic substances. So they do share a certain chemical structure, all of them. And uh, now, Rick Strassman wrote his book, The Spirit Molecule, a number of years ago, proposing that maybe this endogenous substance is being produced by the pineal gland and spread, and bursts of that could create various kinds of spontaneous psychedelic effects or so forth. He has later retracted on this particular proposal. He has found that there is no particular role of the pineal gland in producing dimethyltryptamine. Now, this became such a popular idea, and I find that in New Age circles very much. Sometimes people like an idea, and without, he just said, this is my hypothesis. He didn't say that this was a proven fact.
Mm.
But now that he actually has been part of actually analyzing it, he's found that it's not the pineal gland does not have a special role in creating this substance. But nonetheless, there is then an endogenous and a normal level of this particular substance in humans. Mm. And I guess the way I look upon it is um, as a theory as to how do psychedelic substances work. Just a second here. Um,
Yeah.
Anyway, as I mentioned, some of the symbolism or some of the visions that people have under the influence of, say, ayahuasca, which includes the effects of dimethyltryptamine, they really go back to the same kind of mythology that ancient peoples had. In other words, the most common experience people have under ayahuasca is to see serpents. And the serpents, they are really the waves, the big macrocosmic waves that the Mayan calendar system explained. Um, and Now, these waves, as I also mentioned earlier, they also were the ones that created a kind of rectilinear geometry to the human mind. That's what happened 5,000 years ago, and that rectilinear geometry, those straight and perpendicular lines, is really at the heart of creating a civilization. But I also mentioned that there was a downside to that from our perspective, at least, because there was this carrying of a duality, a carrying of a dark filter, partly with this new mind. But if you go back to earlier times, so to speak, the serpents is among the most ancient of all subjects of human art. You have a serpent being formed in a created as a piece of art in Botswana that is about 70,000 years old, and it tells you something about the importance that serpents used to have in the minds of people. In Göbekli Tepe, you find a lot of serpents in many of the steles that's there. Now, if a new wave comes on with a new structured geometry, and it sort of, in a sense, replaces this old mythology of the tree of life and serpents and so forth. But what psychedelics can do is to sort of disengage the geometry, the rectilinear geometry of the mind that was downloaded with the sixth wave 5,000 years ago. And the way I think it does so is that the curious thing is that the receptors of psychedelic, the curious thing about it is that receptor creates straight lines, you might say, but it's also it's actually you can actually see that it's like a serpent. It's actually called a serpentine protein. So what DMT does is that it sort of interacts with that receptor in such a way that its conformation completely changes. And as that happens, that rectilinear geometry is broken up, and you lose that kind of structure that to some extent limits you and compartmentalizes your traumas and disconnects you from the divine, etc., etc. So I think there is a explanation here to how DMT, and which is sort of the, what should I say, the simplest version of all the psychedelic substances, and a very powerful substance. How that particular substance may actually interact with the brain's receptors, and in doing so, disengage that kind of geometric structure upon which our civilizations with its dominating factors and so forth has been built.
Yes, amazing. Yes. Hmm. Yeah, where to go with this?
Yeah.
I would love to ask you, shift gears a little bit and ask you about what is time for you? And we're talking about these structures. I believe that's part of what you're talking about, the disengaging of structures. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you see as if, let's say, an individual or a collective is able to release this geometric structures? What does that do to time and our
Oh,
current collective of understanding of time?
yeah. Well, I would say that it removes the experience of a linear time. And if at its full effect, so to speak, you no longer experience time. Um, Time, would still be measurable because it's based on these. We measure times based on these astronomical cycles, essentially, and they won't end, so to speak. The under Just because there is a change in the human mind. So there is still some kind of measurable time going on, but our experience of time may change dramatically, I think. And I think um, under the influence of psychedelics, people get somewhat of a taste of what is later to come. That would be my response to that. What do you think yourself about time and what its origin?
Good question. I think that it is useful in some aspects. Obviously, it's very useful to, catch an airplane,
Yeah.
and to do our day-to-day things, run a business, meet people, these kinds of things. Its origin, I think it's primarily, yeah, I think it's primarily a function of our mind. I think it's primarily something
Yeah.
that we conceptualize, and it helps us feel safe. It helps us, be practical and meet certain requirements of being a human. But yeah, I'm just curious of, yeah, I've heard people talk about, like in the future might be the past, so the pyramids were built in the future and they represent the past. Like if everything is, if the future, I mean, sorry, if time is our own conscious, that we've got these prisms in our mind that allow us to see the world in that way,
Hmm.
then but if it's not reality, then the future is the past, and the past is the future, and the present is all you have. So, um, yeah, I'm interested in diving into how to use this. I think that probably the leading edge of this is how can you kind of create a better life with yourself, with these understandings, like shifting into a different paradigm, or shifting. I think that's probably what's going to push a lot of people to explore these kinds of conversations and topics. Yeah, do you have any thoughts come to mind around, creating a better life for yourself with this quantum lens?
Well, I think to begin with, to assimilate an understanding of this, of how the evolution of consciousness takes place in accordance with the Mayan calendar system, I think that's a good start. For most people, there is no time plan. There is no cosmic time plan. For most people, things just happen kind of randomly because this or that happened, somebody did this or that. But if you assimilate and study the Mayan calendar system, you will also learn that there is something, there is a plan, there is a direction. It's meant to go somewhere, and it's meant to go to the top of the pyramid, and that's the whole message. So, state of unity consciousness of the ninth wave. And so that's I think is a very important factor to take in here. If you don't look upon it in that way, you will think, especially now, I would say, and that just a lot of catastrophes are coming our way, and they will. I don't doubt that. But on the other hand, it's important to see that that's not really the intended end result from the perspective of the cosmic plan. And so, that is what I think is a very important aspect, and is sort of ignored, and is not only ignored, sometimes it's also very much suppressed, this kind of the true knowledge about the Mayan calendar system. And that is unfortunate, I think. But then, every person has a unique place in this cosmic time plan, and you still then have to if you become aware of the fact that you're part of a cosmic time plan, which is not just your own time plan, so to speak. It's a cosmic thing that involves the entire humanity of this planet. Then you will have to adapt your own living in such a way that it becomes consistent with this cosmic time plan going towards unity consciousness. And and that does mean a lot of things, even if it's individually different. depending on what missions people have and so forth. But um, people will have to think of what they're doing in that framework. So that's sort of the main message that I have. This now secondary message would be, as part of this, as part of understanding this framework and this direction, the intended direction of the universe towards unity consciousness. It also means that you will have to work with yourself in such a way as to remove all the, what should I say, remaining aspects of yourself that may come from these dark filters. Psychologists would say work with the dark sides of yourself, and but then also foster and favor those kind of spiritual practices that which could be all kinds of things, like yoga or breathing techniques or the use of psychedelics or so forth. But you shouldn't do it just like this is my own trip, so to speak. Like this is just what I'm doing because I like it or something like that. You should see that it's part of a larger plan, and make your life choices in the context of that.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, that was very well said. And uh, yeah, okay, cool. It's a great conversation. Yeah, I'm just thinking, anything else, anything else to ask you? Yeah, did you feel anything else relevant to share?
Um, not really. I mean, but I do want to emphasize that the way we talk about here, we have to talk about it in generalities, like philosophy, more or less. But the fact is that this calendar system of the Maya, which is really the cosmic time plan, or the most important aspects of the cosmic time plan. I lost my train of thought there. It's really built under substantially, extensively with scientific facts. It's not just sort of dreaming up or feeling or something like that. It's really very much built up on scientific facts, and so that's the reason I certainly recommend my own books, like the Quantum Science of Psychedelics, or the most recent one, The Living Universe, or any of the older ones, simply in order for people to see that this is not a dreamed up thing. It is really supported by extensive evidence from all aspects of the evolution of the universe. So, yes, I'd like
Hmm.
to make that pitch for myself and for the Mayan calendar.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, really well said. Um, I was going to ask you a question, but I also lost my train of thought. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have do you have just a couple scientific things that comes to mind, like two or three things that might be able to give some some guided posts for people that would then be encouraged to go and read your book, because I would definitely would recommend it. It's a fascinating read and pretty easy with all of the diagrams in there.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's so much to say in that regard. Uh, but it really is also what I'm discussing in my most recent book, the new theory of origins, or the living universe, as it's also called. It really goes back to the very beginning of the universe, and it has something to say about that. And what it says is quite different from the mainstream view of scientists, that, it's just happened that certain particles came into existence by accident, or certain galaxies were formed by accident, more or less, and that this is really how the reason that we come to the place where we are today is really through a series of accidents. And I think that's really what modern science is trying to convey to people. And I think that is profoundly false. And the way I present it, especially in my most recent book, The Living Universe, is how it is actually the evolution of consciousness that is the primary factor. And I might want to add here, it's been for quite some time, the thought has been in the scientific community anyway, that the Big Bang, which they've looked upon as the beginning of the universe, happened 13.8 billion years ago. And that has been a little bit off what I predicted from the on the basis of the Mayan calendar, which would be that the evolution of consciousness starts 16.4 billion years ago. In other words, a couple of billion years before the so-called Big Bang. But what is interesting now is that with these new pictures that are taken by the James Webb telescope, they are starting to review and question the old estimates of the age of or the time of the Big Bang, and and meaning that it would be more consistent with what I have proposed all along. And these are interesting questions for anybody who sort of wants to, what's the beginning, what's the origin of the universe, which is really very much part of our understanding of what is the purpose of the universe, where it means
Hmm.
it's meant to go. And I think the scientific consensus is sort of going in a more reasonable direction now, and hopefully it will be more inclined to accept ideas that consciousness is really, from the very birth of the universe to the present time, it's all about consciousness evolving through a number of organisms and a number of states of human beings and leading up to ourselves. And this is not a product of random changes in matter. It's a predetermined plan. And then everybody will have to make up for themselves who created the plan. Um, Obviously, it is what people have usually called God, but that's not a very good term to use, because it just has a lot of baggage and may not apply to what's really the case.
Yeah, amazing. I have two more questions for you. The first one being, how did you develop your curiosity for this subject? Like, yeah, were you always this curious? Was there something that inspired you to really dive deep on these subjects? And
Yeah,
where does your motivation come from discovery
yeah.
more?
Well, I had a sort of an attraction to Mexico for quite some time, and I was sort of wondering, why would there be pyramids in both the Americas and in the old world, since they presumably didn't have too much contact between them. The reason of building pyramids in both hemispheres, regardless. But then, if that happened approximately simultaneously, and now it's very approximate, but roughly in the same time frame, that means that there must be some kind of a cosmic forces influencing us, I would say. So I had that attraction for to begin with. But then in 1979, I made a backpacking tour of Mexico and Guatemala, and I really then and got in contact really with the Mayan calendar for the first time, and that really kept me hooked. I really realized that my purpose of life was connected to it. But then, later I also found that there are things like, for instance, in the Mayan calendar system, I'm born on the day 5 Jaguar, meaning that I have that kind of a potential for somebody who sees things that others sees in the dark, you might say. That's what jaguars do, basically.
Mm.
So I can see in retrospect that there are aspects of my birth, even though it was far away in the land of the Vikings, I would say, in Sweden, that I was born, it still was part of my mission for this life to do that. So it's much of a mission, and once you have a mission, you can feel that there is some kind of a divine connection, and then you really realize that that's something you have to follow, whether it's wherever it leads in a certain sense, and that's what happened to me.
That's awesome. Is there someone or anywhere you'd recommend to get a Mayan calendar reading? Or like, how did
Um,
you know that you had 5 Jaguars? Or is there
oh
someone or
well,
something you would?
it's easy to find. There's a bunch of calculators on the internet to find out, but they're not always the true calendar. There is a false calendar out there called the dream spell calendar, and that the Maya never used. So you have to follow the true calendar and find the ones that are consistent with what the Maya themselves are using. And if you want to look at that, I can recommend either the Mayan Magics website, or the Mayan Calendar Portal, or the Tzolk'in Explorer, um, and maybe some others as well that would tell you what day size you're in. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I do readings myself for people sometimes, and because it's a little, there's more to say about it. It's a reading is based on several different calendrical influences. So that's, of
Okay,
course,
cool. Yeah.
if you can find a Mayan elder to do it, that's good.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I'm in Italy at the moment, so I'm not sure I'll find any Mayan elders around here. But maybe sometime when I'm over in your part of the world. So my last question, um, UFOs and aliens. Tell me more. Do they exist?
Well,
Where are they?
well, essentially, I think you're asking the wrong person. Um, I certainly don't claim any expertise in that particular area. Um, And to me, it may sound strange, but I'm not particularly interested. I'm not saying that they don't exist or anything like that, but I want to focus on the evolution of humanity, and how that has been created by these various shifting states of consciousness. That's what's important to me. And if there are aliens out there or not, well, I hardly have an opinion. I'm ignorant on the matter, but it doesn't seem to matter very much to me, whatever the question is. I mean, wouldn't it be surprising that there are, I mean, pretty much everyone believes that there are planets out there with life, But if they're here, I don't know. There's a lot of indications, a lot of things we can't explain in the sky and stuff like that. For sure, there might be. I
Mhm.
don't know. But you're asking the wrong person.
Mhm. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing all that you have created. Yeah, I can see the Jaguars coming through and you seeing through the light, seeing through the darkness at the light. Yeah, where would people like find you if they wanted to get some of your materials or your books?
Thank you, Jordan. Well, my website is Calleman, CALLEMAN.com. Um, so that's the main source, and there you can go to find my books. My books are all on Amazon.com as well, and if you have my name, you will find them. That's all I can say.
Uh, Amazing. I will definitely recommend your work to anyone that's interested in what we've been talking about. Maybe not the aliens, as you said, not your expertise, but yeah, the quantum science of psychedelics. It's a really interesting read. It drew me to contact you. So yeah, thanks so much, Carl, for your time.
Oh, thank you,
It was really
Jordan.
fun.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it feels like we're brothers in arms in this, and that's good. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks. I just